This week's episode of the Rural Woman Podcast is brought to you by the patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast. This amazing group of individuals contribute financially to the Rural Woman Podcast to ensure the stories of women in agriculture hit your earbuds each and every week. Want to join them in supporting the stories of women in agriculture while getting access to extended episodes, patron-only episodes, and other great perks? Head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more about how you can become a patron through Patreon. Hi, I'm Caitlin Dubin, and this is the Rural Woman Podcast. I'm a first-generation farmer who married into agriculture. Born and raised in a city, I was so unfamiliar with where my food came from, but I was determined to figure it out. Through my journey into agriculture, I saw women who were strong but humble, often taking a back seat. To me, these women were leaders who deserved a seat at the table. I created the Rural Woman Podcast to share the voices of women in an industry whose stories often went untold. The rural entrepreneurs who live and breathe their work, full of grit and pride. We come here to share our stories, to be in community with each other, to be challenged and inspired, but most importantly, to be celebrated and to be heard. We may not all live, farm, ranch, or homestead the same, but we are all connected. We are rural women, and our stories are worthy of being told. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Rural Woman Podcast. Today you'll meet Bailey Koch. Bailey is a fourth-generation rancher from Carr, Colorado. Bailey shares with us her journey of growing up on the family ranch, navigating the shift into motherhood, and working alongside her sister to carry the family legacy forward. We talk about the balancing of ranch life with raising her son Colter, challenging misconceptions about agriculture, and the importance of self-care and community. Bailey also shares how writing has become a meaningful way to connect with others in agriculture. My friends, the connection piece in agriculture is huge and a big reason why we still do what we do here today on the Rural Woman Podcast. And if you are looking to connect with other incredible women in agriculture from all over the world, join us in our Facebook community, the Rural Woman Podcast community. Over on Facebook, we have a group of over 1,000 women in community with one another there. And it is a great place to come and connect with other women and other fans of the show. We will pop the link to the Facebook community in today's show notes. So just scroll down on your podcast player of choice and click and join our group. Without further ado, my friends, let's get to this week's episode with Bailey. Bailey, welcome to the Rural Woman Podcast. How are you today?
I'm really good. How are you?
I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to get to know you more and to hear your journey in agriculture. So for the folks who are unfamiliar with you, tell us who you are, where you're from, and what your connection to agriculture is.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for having me. My name's Bailey Koch. I am from Carr, Colorado. It's a little small, almost non-existent railroad town. I am the fourth generation on my family's farm and ranch. My sister and I are currently working on taking over the operation where we run around 250 head of commercial cows. We farm wheat, do some custom combining for corn, and then we raise all our own hay, which is Sudex and alfalfa, and then some wheat hay.
So just a little bit of everything.
Yes, yeah.
And you had mentioned that you are the fourth generation and the fifth generation is joining us today as well.
Yeah, everybody's been extremely excited that I had my son because, having another boy in the family versus us girls.
So tell me more about the history. So you are the fourth generation. Tell me about the history of when your family started ranching in that area or how you came to be in that area.
Yeah. So my great grandpa moved up to Colorado from Missouri, and the story was that he got really tired of blowing up tree stumps in his fields. And he went to where he couldn't find any trees, which also meant there was no water. But he settled on our family's place, and he had multiple jobs, but he hauled bread into town on these long routes. And then my great grandma raised all the chicken and the eggs that supplied the bigger city, Fort Collins, near us. And then my dad and my grandpa and his brother and my uncle and everybody expanded to where we are now. There was a ranch division in between my great uncle, and my grandpa. So we lost some land there and changed our operation a little bit. All that happened before I was born. And then my sister and I were born, and we decided we were going to show steers and do stuff like that to kind of be part of it. And then we just slowly and steadily got more involved with the operations and running equipment and not showing steers, but being around the cattle and weaning and AIing and a lot of different stuff.
You mentioned something earlier about, people being excited that obviously there's a cute little baby boy on the farm now, but you and your sister grew up essentially doing everything that if you would have had a brother, you would have had to do. So talk to me about, how your passion for agriculture was shaped on the ranch and how you and your sister are still there today.
Yes. So my dad always told us growing up that it wasn't going to look the same as how he and my uncle did it, but we were more than capable of doing it. So, even though it's been kind of a weird transition for my dad and my uncle, who really didn't have girls around growing up, we've been very supported that way. My uncle and my dad go out of their way to try to make us feel like we can do whatever we put our minds to. And then they've also done a lot of different research into different products and different equipment we can have to make this life easier for us. Like we now have like a electric fence post pounder and like all this other stuff that they've really branched out for. But I always loved going and feeding cows when I was a kid. And then we started AIing for our own show steers. And my sister and I would beg my dad to take us beforehand, like before school. And we loved going and checking cows. We were like, that is where we really got into everything. And then from there, we just kind of just really widened our horizons as far as the farming and everything else. So we kind of started participating more after that.
For sure. And I love that they really recognize that there could be that divide with, even just physical strength. Like there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a electric post pounder. And that to me sounds like a dream as I, think about it's pounding really the posts. Right. What are some of your earliest memories growing up on the ranch?
I remember we had like bottle calves, a story that I always tell everybody and they think it's hilarious. We were gathering up our cows to pull out the bulls and wean calves. And my dad had mentioned to my grandpa, who I was riding with, that we needed to watch to make sure any cows were open. And the cows, I watched this one cow and she was open, and I went to my friend's house that night and they were asking me about gathering up the cows, and I said, yeah, there was this cow and I watched this bull hump her instead of saying like he was trying to breed her, and they just thought it was the funniest thing because I was like 5 and I had told them that, and I was like, yeah, that's great. I keep telling everybody this story.
Well, farm kids and ranch kids are probably one of the first to learn about the birds and the bees, but, obviously using the correct terminology when you're 5.
Yes. Yeah. I was like, that was really great.
Yeah. So you grew up on the ranch, but you didn't go to school in a smaller community. Talk to us about going to school in a more urban area.
So my graduating class of high school was 500 kids, and it was definitely different. Like even in our middle school, which was in the smaller town, I can remember like going to school and I was like, wow, I don't really know or like identify with anybody. There was like a few people that had like horses or something, but it was mostly all town kids. So we didn't really I didn't really connect with anybody for a very long time. And then when we got into high school, my junior year, so my second to last year, I decided that I wanted to join an FFA program, and there wasn't one at the school. And then they actually were adding one, so I was on the officer team and I helped start up the FFA program at the school. But even the ag teacher I had at the school, he asked me one day, he was like, do you need roosters to have baby chicks if we have hens? And I was like, no, chickens are asexual. They just duplicate. That's what happens. And I was like, this is supposed to be our ag teacher.
Right. Well, and you said like not being able to really connect with your fellow students, like that can be, being the outsider in school is never a comfy experience for anyone. To your knowledge, is the FFA program still running through the school?
Yep,
Yeah.
it is. They have a huge greenhouse now. They've just changed their oyster fry to a different kind of dinner to try to get a little better funding, because they have another chapter that's started to be kind of a competitive race between the two of them, but it's still running, and there's two very good teachers in there now. So,
well, that's great. During school and obviously after you graduated, was there any other career path that you thought that you would like to go down versus continuing on the farm and ranch?
Growing up, I really wanted to study crop genetics and get into gene splicing and stuff like that. And then I also wanted to be an astronomer, but I definitely never pictured myself in a lab coat once I got older. And then I worked on a dairy heifer development program for a while. And then when I went back to school to get my bachelor's, I was working at a feed store that's close called Momgar's.
Talk to me about, the experience of going to school for agriculture and being around kids who kind of understood the lifestyle.
It was so different. It was so refreshing to go to this. I went to Cheyenne for my first 2 years of college, but it was so different to go and to be around people that actually had a connection with livestock, let alone they came off of decent sized ranches out in the middle of Wyoming. Like one guy actually still uses big horses to feed hay in the winter. And it's really cool. It just was so different to have that versus these city kids that kind of were like, what's going on? Which my husband was one of them. But it's definitely, it was a big change. And I had a hard time kind of adjusting to that, even because I was like, well, I don't know as much as everybody else does here. And before, I knew probably more than most people did.
Right. You had mentioned that your husband, did he grow up in agriculture, or was he agriculture aware, or he was completely...
None of it. He, when we first started dating, I had told him that I was weighing in my show steer, and he's like, "You're doing what?" I was like, yeah, I lead this steer across the scale, and then we see what he weighs, and then at the end, we see how much he gained. And he was like, what do you mean?
Well, it's a completely, I grew up in the city. I didn't know anything about agriculture until I got here. Some may say I still don't know enough about agriculture, but I'm learning, and I think that's kind of a neat thing. And when you get to immerse yourself in different industries and different ways of life, I think you can bring different perspectives with your time through your education, and even, marrying your husband who didn't know anything about agriculture. What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions that you've come across from folks who don't really know about the industry?
I kind of think, especially now as we're going into a different time frame, I would say, where people are wanting to homestead and stuff like that, is that I think there's a really big misconception in between big farms and how maybe animals are treated. You do see really bad situations, but that's not a lot of them. And then I also think in between, we all have a place at the table. I've heard somebody else say that on here, but just because you have an organic farm doesn't mean mine's bad because it's not organic. We all have a place at the table, and all of us working together would be huge instead of kind of going against each other.
Yeah. And just having that camaraderie and the understanding, right? Like that there's no right way of doing things. There's different ways. And it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't make one better than the other. It really is a good thing to have the options for consumers to purchase with their buying dollars of what they value. And essentially, that's what you're doing when you are buying groceries at the grocery store. You are buying what you value. I want to go back to the farm and ranch. You had mentioned that you do custom combining. That is something that I find very interesting. Obviously, we do combining here, but it is very much for our operation. So take us through that process.
Growing up, we used to farm and rent this little chunk of ground that like the game and wildlife division had. And it was really well off for what we did because we didn't have to pay for any water and we could grow corn there and not have to worry about the water because the water was all provided by these little duck ponds. But it ended up being something that we couldn't renew our contract with them. So we have all the equipment and then we didn't have any corn. So we started cutting this corn for some neighbors. And there's 2 different farms and one of them's a very small dairy and they harvest all their own corn and then flake it and then feed it back to their cows. And then the other producer is just a little small family operation and he just sells all of his corn. But right around the 1st of November, my uncle's like constantly going over there and checking where the corn is. And then we move all the equipment over and then we start harvesting and it's only like usually a week long. And then we clean up the corn stalks afterwards. Bale all the corn stalks and then we bring it back and either feed the cows or sell some of them.
What is the typical growing season like in northeastern Colorado?
It kind of depends. Last year was really dry and hot. It was not a great year. Our cows are like our pastures are not in good shape because the cows and there's not enough feed. But typically we plant our winter wheat, we grow red winter wheat. And then it comes up and we have our alfalfa it's on its 4th year. So we're going to rip it up and replant it here soon. But we'll do about 2 to 3 cuttings of alfalfa. We'll run our wheat hay and then we'll cut all the wheat hay and then we replant it to Sudex. We do some fertilizing across there because it is a rotational crop. So it's kind of not always the best on what it grows. So we have to do some nitrogen and stuff like that on it. But that's all irrigated ground. And we have 1 rotational sprinkler and that's pretty much all we have for our irrigated ground.
And you had said is it a cow-calf operation?
Yes, yeah.
So when are you guys calving?
We've pushed it back a little bit, but we've started calving at the very end of March and into April. April here can tend to be pretty snowy and cold still. That's usually when we get most of our moisture. There's been some nasty blizzards we've had around that time frame, but we calve in between there and we start with our replacement heifers and usually they calve the first couple weeks. We try to synchronize them to where they calve at the same time and hopefully we get through like the night checks and everything like that quickly so we're not drug out forever, but sometimes that doesn't work so fantastic. But they right around, I believe it's like the 10th or something, 10th of April is when we should start calving this year.
So talk to me about how being a new mom has fit into all of those things.
Yeah. When we decided we wanted to have a baby, I told my husband that the one thing I didn't want was to be pregnant during the summer. I did not want to be heavy pregnant and running around in the heat. So my son was born on April 2nd, and the day that he was born, my sister told me there was like 12 calves born the same day. So she had to tag all these calves by herself. But I had helped her tag calves, and it was kind of, comical, I'm sure, to watch because my uncle's house sits like really close to where our pasture is where we calve out the cows. So I think he sits there with his binoculars and watches us sometimes just to get a good laugh. But it's been a little interesting because he didn't have great head control, so I was a little afraid of going in some of the equipment with him early on and out in the pastures and everything. So my sister actually had to calve out most of the cows this year by herself with my dad's help. But now he's going and feeding with us, and he's had his first wheat harvest and everything. So it's been a little different, like scaling back on myself and like trying to sit at home and be like, okay, well, I should be doing this. Like I could be doing this. It's been a little rough to adjust to that and the being less productive, I should say.
Right. I think of you as more productive because not only are you doing all of those things, you're also keeping another human alive. So that is a reward in itself, right? Talk to me about being a new mom and, those struggles of staying at home. If you're comfortable, like how has it been, I guess, postpartum when it comes to supports for you as a new mom?
Well, everybody here has been really supportive. I will say that. Like, there's not been a time where I was like, no, I really don't think I should do that, or like I shouldn't. Like, I don't think I went out to cows for probably a month or two. And then I finally went back out, and my sister was like, let me know if his head is banging around. Let me know if he's okay. We'll leave. Like, do whatever. Like, I'm sorry. Like, let me know. So everybody's been really fantastic. It was probably pretty rough at first, like to kind of adjust to it because I was like, I really felt like I should have been doing more. I was able to like pretty much take over the heifer checks at night though because I was feeding him, so it was kind of like worked out all right. But it was rough. Like when I was like, at first I had these expectations where I would just like set him in the crib, turn on the baby camera, and I could go do something. And that didn't quite turn out like I thought, like in my head. And looking back at it, I was like, that was really silly to expect that in the first place. But it's been more enjoyable than I thought it should have been. Really, like, I'm more happy when I get to do what I feel like he needs. But it was a weird adjustment to be like, okay, no, I need to say no to this. I need to do what he needs first.
I like what you said about the expectations. And I think it's very easy for us to put all of these expectations on ourselves and others, really, like with Colter having that expectation that he's going to nap at this time and I'm going to be able to do this, this, and this. Sometimes those don't happen, but the expectations that I think we put on ourselves, sometimes we can be the hardest on ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
What are some things that you're looking forward to in the next growing year when it comes to your family as well as the ranch?
I'm hoping that we kind of keep going a little farther down in what we're AIing. We're trying to breed back more maternal genetics. We, for a really long time, bred what are called club calves when my sister and I were showing. So the cows that we would keep out of that aren't always like the most productive, and they're really harder doing cattle. So we're breeding back some stuff that's way more maternal, and I really have enjoyed like watching our herd grow and change over this, and like including him and things as we go. Like that's just been my biggest like excitement, is like being able to go through the things that I went through and maybe do them differently, because like I know that I'm comfortable with him being around it more so than my mom was. But I'm so excited to have him around everything and like be part of it, and I can just it's just really exciting to be able to have different stuff for him. Like we went and got goats, which is fun. And then we're going to have chickens and stuff like that now. So it's just like having all these little different pieces that he should be able to enjoy growing up.
Absolutely. Tell me the thought process behind getting goats. Why did you do this to yourself?
My sister's fiance, actually, he went elk hunting and he decided that he wanted to get pack animals of some sort. So they were looking into getting donkeys or something, and they stumbled across these alpine goats that people use to pack out elk. And he was like, that's a great idea. So he went and bought these alpines, and they're really cool. Like he actually like successfully had his own little elk hunt and brought home his elk and packed it out on the goats, and it went really well for him. They're really sweet. They're pretty good sized already. They're pretty tall. They haven't weighed a bunch yet, but they're pretty tall. And then I was like, well, I'm going to go get a couple pygmy goats. And then we went and grabbed a couple pygmy goats. My sister and I hauled them home in a dog kennel, but they're not quite as friendly. Somebody had sold them at our local sale barns. They aren't like super friendly like the alpines are, but They're funny.
That's awesome. And I love that the Alpine goats are using them for something
Yeah,
useful. And obviously, pygmy goats, I think, are useful because they're cute, but
we call them cookie and cream. They're white and brown, and yeah.
very cute. Well, and when Colter can run around, I'm sure he'll be chasing those chickens and picking up all of their eggs. And
Oh yeah, and he loves the goats. He thinks they're hilarious. Like any animal he's really into right now, but he loves the goats.
love that. That's so good. You can help support the stories of women in agriculture to be shared through the Rural Woman podcast on Patreon. What is Patreon? It's a membership-based platform that helps fund and support creators like me to create and produce content like this that you all love. New to the Rural Woman podcast Patreon is ad-free listening and patron-only bonus content and exclusive episodes. Learn more and join the patron gang today at patreon.com/The Rural Woman Podcast. So you shared with me your Facebook page before we started talking, and I took a look through, and you do some really beautiful writing and sharing on there. So tell me when that started for you and what your inspiration is.
I always kind of wrote, it was kind of like an outlet, I guess. Like I would kind of write these little stories or whatever, and it never really was something that I looked that much into. And then in middle school, I actually submitted a couple poems to this contest, and I was one of like 3 winners from my school. And I got really into writing and kind of having this little journal that I wrote in. And then I went back to get my bachelor's degree. I wanted to do some communications. I wanted to write for something. And I wrote a couple articles, and it just didn't feel right. So I just kept writing my stuff. And then I got married, and I made the makings of a deal page, which is what my maiden name was. And because my sister and I are both girls, our name is going to be gone this year. So it was kind of like a bittersweet thing for me. So it was kind of a memory of that. But I started writing there, and I just was sharing it. And I mean, it's not anything I'm doing anything besides just making myself happy writing. So it is what it is.
I love that, though. That is like reason enough to do it and to write. And your poems and your stories are beautiful.
Thank you.
So I encourage you to keep doing that. What do you think is the most maybe challenging part of writing for you? Or is there a challenging part?
I think it's the consistency in doing it. So I'll like just kind of think of something when I'm checking cows or I'm like out feeding or running a tractor or whatever. I'll think of like this thing to write down, and then I won't write it down. And then I'm like, what did I think there? Why did I not write that down? That and like having the time to constantly do it or like publish what I'm writing, like it's probably part of the reason that it's so small still is just like I haven't devoted the time to it that I should.
It can be hard, right? Like, and like you said, you have a fleeing idea that comes in and out of your brain, and you don't have your phone to type it out or a piece of paper to write it down. And when it's time to sit down and write, it's like, what did I want to say again?
Yes. Yeah.
So as you and your sister work towards taking over the family ranch and the family farm, what are some goals for the future?
I think one of ours, and this is just kind of my talking, since my family has gone through a ranch division and like I watched my uncle and my dad maybe struggle with communication, it's really hard being this close knit. Like we all live within a mile of each other. Like we're really close together all the time. We're always in each other's business. Like we're just very, like we all eat lunch together every day. Like it's very, very close knit. It's really hard to have good communication all the time and to like always give each other like the grace and the space that we need to like really work together well most of the time. And I think that's something my sister and I really, really try to have because we've watched, I mean, it really bothered my grandpa when we were growing up about his relationship with his brother. It was not a good one.
That is probably one of the best goals I have ever heard anyone say that they have is to have a goal of good communication, not like what we're going to accomplish, what we're going to like bring to market next year or anything like that. Good communication. And like you said, it is so important. And it's something that I think is overlooked until we get into situations where good communication could have saved our bacon beforehand.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, for us, since we grew up and watched it, it's just been so important. And like, we've watched each other, like, our relationship when we were younger wasn't fantastic. And then we've like got to where we can actually like talk to each other and we understand where each of us is coming from. And like, just the way that it is, our growth and everything has just been a lot better since that's been what our goals are. And at the end of the day, like it matters what we take and what we grow and what we do, but it also matters that we don't dislike each other.
Right? It still matters at Thanksgiving dinner. We all want to be sitting with one another. How do you want to move forward in connecting consumers to their food? You mentioned in high school, like that was that big disconnect. Is there anything that you hope to do in the future to make that connection?
Well, that was also kind of one of the things I liked about writing was like, well, maybe I can, even if I reach one person, like that's just one person, he can maybe spread that knowledge to somebody else, or like go into more research about it, or he could like go into doing something that he liked. Like, who knows, if I tell somebody like, oh, I know this random fact about a goat, like they may like goats now, or they may want to like get bees or something, like their own, just like spreading the connection. And then I've always enjoyed learning from other people that were producing and what they did, because we're all so different.
Right. Yeah. And, we can learn something from our neighbor, or we can learn somebody that lives in a completely different country from us and what they're doing. And who knows, maybe you have inspired people to get alpine pat goats for their next hunting season.
Maybe, who knows?
What advice would you give to the next generation of farmers who may be navigating challenges when it comes to preserving your family legacy on farms or ranches?
I think it's really hard, especially when you're young, to not like live out your family's name. Like, I guess is how I would say it. Growing up, my dad was always like, oh yeah, I farm and ranch for a living to anybody that he met. But it kind of always felt like my sister and I were in a shadow of what we were. My family raised purebred cattle for a really long time, and they competed nationally, and we didn't do that. So it was kind of like, oh, I know your dad, but what do you guys do, or what are you doing? And I think like getting out of the shadow and like doing your own thing and being comfortable in who you are and what you have your interest in is huge, on top of like being able to like carry forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think making a place and space for yourself in an operation and figure out what it is that you're good at and what you can be doing to contribute, because, there's so many pressures on generational farms. And I think as women, finding a place in an operation that not only can you physically do the labor, can you mentally do the labor and take the load on of all of these other things. The mental load of a woman on an operation is absolutely huge. So what do you do for yourself to take that time for you? And I know it's hard as you're holding a sleeping baby, and I'm asking you this question.
Yeah, well, it's beforehand I didn't find it as hard. Like, I really enjoy reading. My sister and I both are fairly active. We work out and things like that, but now it's a little harder. I tend to maybe go get some coffee more often than I should now, but I think that like it's been easier for me to take the time for myself once I've like put it out of my head that I'm not just like being bad by doing it. Like, there was a really long time I struggled with like going and working out, especially. Like, I was like, oh, okay, well, I can't do that because I need to be doing something for him instead. I need to be holding him, or while he's napping, like I should be cleaning or like washing whatever I need to wash or whatever. But like taking that little bit of time for myself and like doing something that I actually enjoy, or as he's getting a little bit older and like doing more stuff on his own, it's been a lot easier to like craft or do whatever I want to do.
Right. And, we hear this all the time because it's true. Like, we can't pour from an empty cup. And if you're depleted, how are you supposed to show up as a good mom, a good wife, a good rancher, all of these things, right? We have to take care of ourselves. And I'm glad you're taking the time. I also enjoy peruse into town for a coffee every once in a while.
Yeah, I definitely, there's probably at least weekly visit we make now, but it's kind of...
That's okay. I think, you know what? I always think I could be doing a lot worse things.
Yeah. My husband chews, and I'm like, I don't want to ever hear you tell me about how expensive the coffee is ever again. I went and bought a can of it chew, and I was like, it was $8.
Oh, that's funny. Bailey, my last question for you is, what is the most rewarding part about being a rural woman for you?
I would say, like, gaining the connections. I think when I first started, especially after I had him, I felt like I was kind of like alone a little bit, I guess, just because there really hadn't been anybody that had had a baby, or, my dad raised my sister and I, but it was a little different. So I felt fairly alone. And then I was like, well, I want to start listening to podcasts. And that's when I found yours. And I was like, I really like this. I really like the fact that all these other women have come from different places, and they have all different backgrounds, and they're coming together, and they're all sharing really good information, and they're all talking about their own struggles and their own triumphs and things like that. And I hope going forward I can be more of an inspiration for others, I guess is what I would say.
Well, you've already inspired me. You have tamed Colter. You have made him go to sleep all in front of my eyes. So I am impressed.
Really sleepy. Taming Colter is kind of an all-day task.
Yeah, but he's real sweet. He might be so Colter might have a flex. Colter might be the first boy on the Rural Woman podcast. Oh. So, just don't tell the rest of them, Colter. They can't come.
Special exception.
Right? He is. He's kind of real cute. So... Bailey, it has been so great chatting with you. For the folks who would like to connect with you after the show, where can they find you online?
Yeah, so Making of a Deal is my writing page, but you can always reach out to me on my personal Facebook. It's just under Bailey Koch. That's kind of what I do. You can check out my Aussies too if you want to, at 4 Aces Aussies, but they're they're cute, but...
I will link everything in the show notes so people can find you, your cute baby, and the cute doggos. Yeah. Bailey, thank you so much for sharing your story with me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Rural Woman Podcast. The Rural Woman Podcast is more than just a podcast. We are a community. A huge thank you to the Rural Woman Podcast team, audio editor Max Hofer. A special thanks to our Patreon executive producers, Sarah Riedner from Happiness by the Acre. To learn how you can become a Patreon executive producer or other ways to financially support the show, head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast to get the latest episodes directly on your playlist. And if you are loving the show, please be sure to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other platform that accepts ratings and reviews. You can connect with us on social media at The Rural Woman Podcast and with me at Wild Rose Farmer. One of the best ways you can support the show is by sharing it. Send this episode to a friend or share on your social media. Let's strengthen and amplify the voices of women in agriculture together. Until next time, my friend, keep sharing your story. Did you know that you can get this same great episode of the Rural Woman Podcast ad-free? I get it. Listening to ads during a podcast isn't always my favorite either. But in order to keep the lights and coffee pot on here at the Rural Woman Podcast Studios, they are necessary. I am so grateful to each and every one of my sponsors, but if you yourself would like to skip the ads while supporting the show, consider joining me over on Patreon. Patrons of the Rural Woman podcast get ad-free episodes starting at Tier 5 on their podcast player of choice each week, plus some other great benefits. Find out more by heading to the link in today's show notes to learn how you can become a patron through Patreon.